Howdy folks, welcome back to Boondockery. It's time for some more quick tips. Today's tips are all about how I control my cordage. Whether you're into bushcrafting or wild camping, one of the most essential parts of your kit is going to be cordage, whether that's natural or synthetic. Today, I'm going to be talking about the venerable 550 cord, also known as paracord. When most beginners start bushcrafting or wild camping, they'll come out with a brand new hank of 550 cord or hemp cordage or jute or sisal or what have you. And they'll have this pretty hank of cordage and they're going to take it out, and any single time that they need cordage for something, they're going to pull it out and they're going to make sure they have perfect measurements of what they need it for, and then they use it. And then when they're finished using it, if they tie a good knot, they're going to take it back home and they're going to have this odd length of cordage that's going to be perfect for that specific location, that specific time, and that specific purpose. But if it's perfect for anything else, it's going to be by pure accident. And before you know it, you have a great big box full of odd and end pieces of cordage. Another thing that happens is the dreaded knot ball of cordage. That's when you try to get in a hurry and you start taking that perfect store-bought hank of cordage apart, and before you know it, it starts twisting around each other, and before you know it, you've got something that's scary. It looks like it should be on a 1950s B-grade horror film. The Attack of the Killer Cordage! I'm also going to show you some tricks on how to fix this. Early on, I discovered that I use cordage for specific things, and every once in a while, I'll have an odd and end purpose for some cordage. Maybe I'll be in a situation to where I decide that I need a tripod, and I need cordage for that, but I don't always need that. I always need cordage for my tarp, whether that's for the ridge line, or I'm going to use those for guy lines, or whatever else. I know I'm always going to have those. So one of the things that I always do is I pre-measure a ridge line and I pre-measure guy lines, and I keep those with my tarp all the time. However, as opposed to taking out a great big hank of cordage, I determined that I never am in a situation to where I need more than about 4 or 5 yards of cordage. So I decided that I would go ahead and pre-measure some 550 cord, cut it into sections, and have those sections available to me whenever I may need any. If I wind up having a little bit extra, no problem. If I start off with one pre-measured piece of cordage and start using it and realize I need something longer, I pre-measure 3 different lengths. So if one doesn't cut it, I can go up to the next longest one. And then if by any chance that's not long enough, I can attach it to one of the shorter pre-measured sections. The 3 pre-measured lengths that I use are set up on a number system. That number system goes 1, 2, and 3. Each one of those numbers refers to the number of double arm lengths that I use to measure that cordage. This would be a number 1. I would go ahead and would tie that off, cut it off, and burn it. And that would be the length of a number 1. A number 2 is 2 double arm widths. 1, 2. I would then tie it off, cut it off, and burn it. And, believe it or not, number 3, 1, 2, 3. And I would tie that off and cut it and then burn it off. So then I have one that is a double arm width. I have one that is 2 double arm widths and one that is 3 double arm widths. And I've been able to use those measurements of cordage very, very well, either by themselves or in combinations with other lengths, to accomplish any task that I've needed to do within the past several years. As far as organization goes, there's a lot of different ways that you can organize those. One of the things that I do is I will knot the end of my cordage. This would be the knot for a single double arm width. If I had a double arm width, I would literally just tie another knot into the cordage, which would make it a 2 double arm width. And if I had 3 double arm width, well, believe it or not, I would just put another knot in there. Now, the nice thing about this system is it is both visual and tactile. If I was reaching into my pack, I had low light, I had to keep my eye on something else, but I needed to get a certain cordage, I could actually grab that and I could count those knots on this piece of cordage. If you wanted to, you could color code your cordage. You could do a combination of color coding and putting knots on the ends of your cordage. Now, you may think that this could be a bit of a problem when you're tying knots and things like that. It might be able to, depending on how you're using your cordage and what kind of knot you're using. But be perfectly honest with you, I've never really had any problem whatsoever using this knot system to identify my cordage or to deal with when I'm tying and untying knots. I have found that this pre-measured cordage system works very, very well. And I've been using the same cordage for several years now. I have different sets of cords based on the seasons, and I'll change those colors out. Now, once I have all these cords measured out, I have to have some way to organize them and some way to make certain that they're not going to be thrown in a bag or in the bottom of my pack and get tangled up. One of the easiest ways I've found to deal with the cordage through all of the different lengths that I use, the singles, the doubles, and the triples, are simply by folding it in half, folding it in half, folding it in half until it's a short enough length and then tying a knot. I'll go ahead and demonstrate that. I have a single length of 550 cord. I'm just going to go ahead and pull 2 ends together. That's in half. Fold it again in half, and then I can very easily tie a knot in it, just an overhand knot. Now, that's not going to get tangled, and I'm also going to be able to see the knots that are in the bottom, feel the knots, and I can also clip this onto a D-ring or an S-beaner. As a matter of fact, I like to organize mine on the S-beaners. I'm going to simply clip in the end to one of the S-beaners, and this S-beaner has my single, my doubles. This S-beaner has my triples and the small pieces of cordage that I use for my Prusik knots. One of the techniques I can use to prevent my cordage from getting tangled is by braiding it into something called a daisy chain. I'm going to use one of my single lengths of cordage, and I'm going to go ahead and find both the ends, pull it down to the halfway point. I am going to tie an overhand knot real quick so I have a loop that would actually be in the center of that piece of cordage. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the cordage, loop it, pull it through that loop all the way, and it forms another loop. Then I'm going to take this cordage, pull that loop down a little bit because this cordage has complete control of it, and then I am going to feed another loop of cordage in there, and I'm going to pull that cordage up and through until it's tight, and then I'm going to pull it back down and adjust it and pull it back through again. And I am going to repeat this process until I get to the end of my rope. I will go ahead and finish this up and show you how I complete my daisy chain. My daisy chain is complete. Right now I have the last little bit of a loop that I could make, and I have 2 loose ends. I'm simply going to feed both those loose ends in through that loop. And then I'm going to pull that tight. So now it's not going to come undone. This is just a single double arm width length of cordage. I can do this to any length of cordage if I so desired. Now, the really nice thing about this is it's very compact, it's very handy. I've already got a loop on here that I can clip onto my S-beaner if I want, no problem whatsoever, and be able to dangle that with others. But the nice thing about this is when I'm ready to use this cordage, I simply take those 2 ends of the cordage out of that loop. So they're out of the loop now. I'm going to just go ahead and pull those loose ends, and I now have a usable piece of cordage that's not tangled. Let me show you another trick that I use to prevent my cordage from getting tangled. Another technique I use, and I'm certain that there is a correct name for this, but I simply just call it a figure 8 wrap. And if any of you know the correct name for it, but feel free to put it down in the comments, so that way you educate me as well as anybody else. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a length of my cordage. I am going to put one end between my index and middle finger. I'm going to separate my thumb and my pinky, and I'm going to wrap around my thumb first, pull it up and over my pinky, down and around, up and over my thumb, and I repeat that figure 8 fashion of a wrap until I get pretty close to the end. I have just a little bit of cord left over, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull that off of my hand and wrap this around, loop it back up on itself, a little snug to where it's almost like a knot, wrap it around once and twice, and then I simply tuck it up underneath of itself, pull it snug, and I now have another piece of cordage that I could easily put on my S-beaner or a carabiner. And even if I were to throw a bunch of these in the bottom of a cordage bag, they're not going to get tangled up with others. And just like the daisy chain, if I untie the end piece and drop it, I now have a completely untangled piece of cordage ready to use. It was organized when I could store it, and it is completely knot-free for me to be able to use it. Well, folks, hopefully my quick tips on controlling your cordage help some of you out, and hopefully it's something you'll be able to throw in your bushcrafting or wild camping bag of tricks. As always, folks, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.